and all the folks online. Are there any members of the committee online? Okay, so all that's here is here. Thank you. And now all that's here is all we have. Well, we'll open this meeting first with any request for bill introduction. Just come to the microphone and yes, sir. Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Joella Hoy with 25 RS 0173, eliminating restrictions on municipal regulation of political signs during certain periods of time around election days.
No objection. That'll be received.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And who would be next?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Whitney Dameron on behalf of City of Topeka. We have 25 RS 0516 relating to inspections of certain rental properties that receive public support, public financial support. Appreciate the opportunity to have this introduced and heard.
Not seeing any action? Yes, sir. Okay. That will be introduced. Thank you.
Thank you.
Will be given to the House. And who's next? Yes, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two introductions, RS 250637, which is contractual provisions for second and third class cities. Those on the committee last year, we had this bill. And then another one, which is RS 250638, which would allow specifically to Butler County, the Fair Board, to elect up to 5 members at large.
Not seeing any objection. Will be introduced. Anyone else? Pretty quiet. We have 3 more full days of committee to introduce. That'll be Monday, Wednesday, and the first Monday in February will be the last day to introduce bills. So if you have anything in the works, please get it going quickly so that the revisor's office can get something prepared. They're going to be inundated with requests at the last, which is pretty normal for human beings to do things at the last. And we will hopefully we'll have a good orderly group of business to take care of in these coming weeks and in these coming 2 weeks and in the weeks couple that we have before we have turnaround. So thank you for coming to this meeting, and especially to our committee members. We have new members and members that have been a part, but I think we have more, maybe about half and half, some new members. So I'd like for, if you all would, as we go around, we can start with you, Representative Brownlee Page. And what is your first name? Wanda. Ma'am, if you would tell us who you are, what district, and tell us what interest you might have in helping local government.
Sorry, I represent District 35 in Kansas City, Kansas, which runs from 1st Street to about 71st Street, and it's cut up, so between 34 and 35. It's kind of messy, but that's where we are. I was interested in this because I want to see my city, my district do better. And I think we can do better if we're more informed and that we do the things we need to do to help everyone, not just some people. You know, we say we the people, but sometimes we the people aren't always included. I'd like to see us do a better job of helping, especially in our local area.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Schlingensieben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tobias Schlingensieben, District 55 here in Topeka. The district runs from Topeka Boulevard here on the other side of the State House, west to Gage, and from the Kansas River to Washburn University. I'm interested in local government because Ernie Mosier was a good friend of mine growing up, and kind of a mentor in some areas. And some of those from the League of Municipalities will remember who he was. And he always hammered into my head the importance of home rule, which he championed. And so I'm honored to sit here and remember him today.
Representative Van Houten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chip Van Houten from District 26, South Olathe and Spring Hill, which is everything east of 169 up to Garmin and then south to Miami County. So my interest in local governments, I've been on the Spring Hill City Council for 3 years. So I've dealt with mill levies and revenue neutral and just our infrastructure needs. And so trying to bring value with that experience.
Thank you, sir. Representative Gardner.
I'm Fred Gardner from District 9, which is Allen County, Anderson County, a little bit of Lynn County and Miami County. We're very rural, and so most of my municipalities are small in size, but they're very important for our way of life, and so I'm very glad to be here and represent them.
Thank you. Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Lynn Melton, and I represent District 36, which is the western part of Wyandotte, back up to Wanda somewhat. And I worked in local government for 4 years, being the assistant to the mayor, and I guess had no experience. It was way different looking out than it was looking in as a citizen. And I just want to be sure that home rule applies to everybody, and I support that. And also that if there's any opportunity to help our community, we're not missing it.
Thank you, ma'am. And our minority member, Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Linda Featherston. I represent the 16th District in Overland Park, which is the mall to the community college to the KU Edwards campus. I asked to return to this committee. This is my third term on here because A, I represent one of the biggest cities in the state, so I think it's important we have a voice, but B, I've always just been really impressed by this committee, how it sets aside politics and just focuses on the business at hand and making things better for our local communities where, you know, that's what we're closest to. And I think that's just a real tribute to the committee, and I've always been pleased to be on it.
And ma'am, I might say that's a real tribute to you for the way you conduct yourself as a minority member.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Representative Blex, our vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I represent House District 12, which is 5 counties. I live in Independence. I'm a retired wildlife biologist, farm and run cattle. And I'm not sure how that fits into local government, but I do have a lot of small towns in my district. And they think I'm important, even though I'm probably not, but they all have their events on the same day at the same time. So it's difficult representing them, but it's really a joy to be able to get things done, particularly for those small towns that maybe have 1 or 2 staff that maybe runs the water department and the vice mayor and every other thing, wears many hats. And I appreciate being on this committee.
Thank you, sir. Representative Essex.
Good morning. I'm Robin Essex. I represent District 78, which is basically picks up where Representative Van Houten's Garmin district stops. And then mine goes north, it goes east to Black Bob and down to about 167th. So southern Olathe. I also am currently serving on the Olathe City Council, and I love this committee again, which was already mentioned. It's very nonpartisan. We work together to do what's best for people, and I really enjoy being on it. And the local perspective, I know many of us have it who have served or are serving on local government, is huge when you're making decisions at the state level. So I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you, ma'am. Representative Collins.
Hello, I'm Representative Ken Collins from the 2nd District in Southeast Kansas. I represent parts of Crawford and Neosho counties, and I have a long, I'm not saying distinguished, but a long career in local government. I've been involved now for close to 40 years. You know, and I know you all are saying, well, he started when he was 5. But anyway, I've been on city council in a couple different towns where I've lived, in Edgerton and in Mulberry, both, well, a couple times in Mulberry, but, and I just really want to do my yearly shout out to the league, because I've, during most of that time, I've been involved with the league going to their training sessions, and it's really a good asset. And I always encourage the city government people in the different cities in my district to take some league training whenever you can, and if it's in local, if it's being held somewhere close, it's good to go. And of course, if it's something that is really important or really has some interest, it doesn't hurt to travel a little ways to get it. And I'm just happy to be here again on this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Lon Pishney. I represent District 122, which is all or part of 5 counties out in southwest Kansas. My address is Garden City. And if I didn't say these next couple of comments, there'd be a couple of people in our audience that would be very disappointed. I represent what a county government is like versus city government. With regard to home rule, there's a significant difference. Cities are constitutional home rule, counties are statutory home rule. And I served on the Kansas Association of Counties board for some time, and I served on the Kansas County Commissioner Association board. One big difference is I had to give up my seat on the county commission when I came to this body, where people in city government do not have to do that. So that's one distinguishing factor between county and city. But I completed 10 years of being a county commissioner in Finney County, and lastly, I will say, Mr. Chairman, my 2 things that I came to this body with were to protect, if you will, local government, and that being cities and counties primarily, and 2, to help advocate for Western Kansas. I've been a resident of even though I grew up north of Manhattan, I've been a resident of Western Kansas since 1967. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Representative Barth, welcome.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and committee members. Representative Carrie Barth for House District 5. I reside in rural Douglas County. I have portions of Douglas County and Johnson County and Miami County and Franklin County. And this is my 2nd term, so my 3rd year of serving on this committee. So not new to this committee. And coming from a rural area, I feel like the constituents that I represent are looking for somebody who represents that rural voice, who often feel like the local governments maybe are not always listening and doing things that benefit folks in the rural communities that live in the country, that live on gravel roads, who are your regular everyday people who often somewhat get ignored, and cities and county governments often are putting in policies and procedures that affect their lives. And people that I know have been chased out of their counties and their homes because of some of the local government overreach. I am a very big proponent of less government for everything. The less government, the better. And you let everybody live their lives as they deem to live their lives. We have a role in doing certain things, so, but less is more. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And Representative Dawn.
Good morning, I'm Dawn Wolf. I'm the 107th district, so north central Kansas, a little bit of Saline County, Ottawa County, half of Cloud County, and then Mitchell County. I have been in local government as a county commissioner for 6 years, so I have to agree with what Representative Pishney has said. We want to make sure that when the state mandates things, that it's not overreach that is putting an excess burden on the counties, because having been there for 6 years and trying to do budgets, sometimes that is very difficult. Another thing that I've done is I've been in the schools for 20 years, so those are my backgrounds. And I look forward to being on this committee.
Well, thank you, committee. I My name is Emil Berquist. I'm representative in 91st District, a little bit of rural and a little bit of urban area in the Wichita North area, Valley Center, Park City, Keachai, and a little bit of Mays School District, and a few cattle. And the cattle are pretty compliant, as he will tell you. So I started in city government when I was 39 years old, and I'm older than that now. So, yeah. And I enjoyed my time as city council and mayor, and I enjoyed my time working with organizations that gave good information, good perspective, good assistance, good support, such as the League of Municipalities. I enjoy this committee. I was asked to lead this, and I didn't turn it down. Appreciate that. I want to give an opportunity for introductions to our staff that'll be with us the rest of the committee year, and we'll start with Mr. Long.
Jason Long with the Office of Revisor Statutes. This is my 19th session up here at the legislature, and I believe it's my 5th staffing local government.
And would you tell your role, that they can understand your role in this committee?
Yes, the Revisor's Office provides legal counsel for the legislature, and so we are in charge of drafting the legislation and any amendments that any members want to consider for this committee, or floor amendments when a bill goes to the full House. If you want those drafted for consideration, you would contact myself or one of my colleagues in the Revisor's Office.
Thank you, sir. And ma'am, if you would introduce yourself.
Hello, my name's Chloe Pavlik. I'll be the AV technician. I basically just cover the streaming and uploading the videos. And this is my first session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Julia Kofoid with Legislative Research. We are here to follow up with any questions you may have or a specific research topic you want to know more about, whether it's a statewide or a 50-state survey, or it's just a local question you have.
My name is Walter Schmidt. I'm also with KLRD. This is my second session. My first session with House Local Government. I was on Senate Local Government last year, so excited to be here. And again, just to reiterate what Julia said, we're here to help with any research questions, any informational requests that you're looking for to get more information from local issues all the way to more national issues. We're here to support you in that aspect.
Local government has a whole lot to do with streets and roads, but this lady has a lot to do with keeping us on a clear path. So please.
Deb Heidemann, my third time with local government, and Representative Berquist, and yeah, try to keep it organized.
Thank you all. Very, very nice. I know you've gone through this in other committees, but we think that we're as important as anybody. So maybe not real important. So I don't want to direct you to the local government, our local government committee's rules, which are the same rules as every committee in the House. And if you have any questions about them, let me know. These are the rules, and these help us to keep that same kind of civility that the minority member mentioned, and that is just keeping a civil tone about discussing matters we're making recommendations on to bring to decisions in the House. So if you have any questions, let me know. And next on our agenda is our last item on the agenda. And I will mention one more time before we bring our guest speaker, if you have bills that your constituents have asked you to bring to consider, you have the ability to bring them to the reviser. And as committee members, you can do that. If somebody else has bills they want to bring, they need to have the auspices of the House and the committee. So use that opportunity if you need to, and try to get that done before by Monday, whatever the first Monday is. I'd like to introduce our next guest, and he's coming from the League of Municipalities. That's Spencer Duncan, and he has a little bit of experience and a little words to share. Give us a little perspective. Most of you have some experience in local government, either paying bills or in some sort of way. So please give your attention and thank you.
Before I get started, I'm going to turn it over real quick to our Executive Director, Nathan Eberlein, because he's got to run to another committee, but he wanted to say hello.
Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, my name is Nathan Eberlein, and I'm Executive Director for the League of Kansas Municipalities. It is, from my standpoint, a great privilege and responsibility to work on behalf of our cities. I appreciate Representative Collins' comments about the training that we do, and it carries the point that our legislative side of things is just one small piece of what the league does. We've existed since 1910. We were formed by cities to work on behalf of cities to provide both training and legal advice, and then of course this advocacy piece as well. And we work hard to be a good resource for our cities, but that also goes for each of you. When questions come up, you have an incredible team here from Legislative Research. We work well with them. But if you have questions about your respective cities, we work well with our counties. Today is Local Government Day. It's an event that we partner with the Kansas Association of Counties. We do our very best to be a resource for local government, and that certainly extends to you. I'll make one last note on Ernie Mosier. We still very much use his 52 tips for public service, and it is that service element that we work so hard to promote for the league. And you'll hear more from my colleague Spencer, and again, if there's anything that I can do to help you, to be a resource, please let me know, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you for being here this morning.
Gosh, look how much taller. Look at that. I gotta go way down here. Well, thank you, Chair. Appreciate this opportunity. Welcome back to those of you who've been on this committee previously. And welcome to the legislature and to this committee for those of you who are new. I am Spencer Duncan. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the League of Kansas Municipalities. This is my 4th legislative session with the League, but it's my 20th legislative session as a lobbyist. Some of you may know I'm a 2nd-generation lobbyist in this building. My father, Tuck, is still lobbying. I'm sure you'll hear from him at times, particularly on liquor issues and transportation issues. Prior to coming to the League, I ran a company called Capital Connection, where I represented lots of groups, as us contract lobbyists do. I was executive director of the Kansas Pest Control Association for 13 years and executive director of the Kansas Recycling Association, among many other groups that I represented. So done this a few times, and every year is a new experience. I am also a member of the Topeka City Council. I'm serving now my 2nd term. So when I stand both in front of our membership and in front of this body, I'm not just here because I hear it from our members or just hyperbole or theoretical. I'm living it every day. I've got just as many emails as anyone about why didn't you plow my road, and can you do something about these darn potholes? What is wrong with you, City of Topeka? So, but they elected me a 2nd time, so that's always, at least I'm not totally messing it all up, I hope. I am married. I've got an 11-year-old in school here in Topeka, and my wife and I are also business owners in this community. She's a financial planner and a partner, and we're owners in a company called Clayton Wealth Partners. So, and then lastly, I am also, and have been for many years, a licensed private detective here in Kansas. So if you wonder why I know things you can't believe I know, there you go. There's a little insight as to what I'm lurking around trying to figure out for people. So just gives you a little bit about who I am. I'm going to do 2 things today. I'm going to kind of give you an overview of the league itself so you have a better idea of what we're up to these days. And then I'll take a little bit of time to highlight a couple of legislative issues that are in front of you, and then obviously give you time to say, why didn't you mention this, Spencer? We'd like to know what's going on with that. As Nathan mentioned, the league was formed in 1910. He did mention it was formed by cities, but it was actually created by an act of the legislature, because in 1910 this body determined that we have to work with our cities to sort of represent and make sure we're taking care of all Kansans, and they wanted to make sure that cities had a presence and a voice in this building to be that resource. And so the legislature sort of helped create the league itself. There are 625 cities in Kansas. Over 565 of those are members. The ones who aren't, that's a question I get a lot, are primarily 500 or less cities that simply either don't have the infrastructure to want to join us, or the dollars, or what various reasons, or just maybe they don't like us, and that's okay. I don't think that's the reason. That's not what we hear, but I'll put it out there. We do have a governing body, and I've provided you in the sheet a snapshot of who they are, so you can look to see that they are very representative of the state. We take their direction, right? I'm not here. I don't guide the board. The board guides me, right? I very much, and Nathan very much, and our staff very much rely on our board who's from the state to give us the direction we need. That the tail does not wag the dog in our organization. And honestly, when I came over to the league, that was very important to me. That was one of the first questions I asked is, I don't want to go to an association, because it's not how I ran associations, where I'm telling my membership how things should be. They've got to tell me how it is, because that's the only way I can stand in front of you as a body and be sincere and be truly representative of the feedback and needs that the local governments are telling us. So there's your sheet. Our current president is Mayor Roy Cessna of the Garden City. As I mentioned on the next one, there are 625 incorporated cities in Kansas. 84% of our population resides in cities. You can see there's the breakdown of the number of cities and the various class sizes and what it qualifies to be a class. We learned this year, I think we knew it, but I think there was a question I got this year about a city who at one point moved up to a class and their population has declined where they could drop down to a class. Now, there's a lot of reasons they probably will never do that for various reasons, but it turned out we actually have nothing in statute that allows that to happen. So even if a city wanted to drop down to a class, there's no way to actually do it. So there's just a fun fact of the Kansas government and how it operates. If you look at the next one, it's the value of the league. As Nathan mentioned, you see me a lot because you're in this building and this is your role as state legislators, but I am a small piece of what we do. My time is spent not just working with you folks, but I do go across the state and I work with local governing bodies to help them on their local policies, because sometimes they just need help. How do we write this ordinance? What's the impact going to be at the state level or our local level? So I spend a lot of time doing that, working with them. I also do a lot of speaking at these groups about being on the council. I do presentations such as how to get along with your staff, right? How can we make sure that we as electeds and our staff are working together to actually get things done? Because that is always a challenge. But we have lots of other areas. We have legal guidance. Our staff last year took over 2,000 phone calls from cities with legal questions. While we do not represent them per se as their attorneys, we absolutely will provide them guidance and give them legal advice as to where they can get that advice or what laws they should or should not be following, what their requirements are. So we have several staff attorneys and they get to deal with all the legal stuff all day. We do help cities with their contracting and hiring processes, everything down from how to install good HR policies to actually assisting them in hiring people. So when they're doing job searches for city administrators, city managers, top-level personnel, we will help them with those searches. It's a service that we offer. As you can probably guess, it's getting harder and harder in the world in general to get anyone to come work, sometimes in government, but particularly in, truthfully, even in the city of Topeka, the capital city, we struggle to get high-level personnel like engineers, but so you can only imagine what it's like for smaller communities in rural Kansas to try to attract and retain people in those communities. And actually, that's one of our issues we'll talk about to help us with retention. We do a lot of communications and outreach programs. We do a lot of professional development and training. We have various programs, leadership programs, training programs. We literally have programs that are simple as, you got elected, that's great, but sometimes, as you know, you get elected and then you say, what do I do now? How does this actually work, right? And so we literally have programs that will help walk them through how to be a better servant on their local government. In local government. And then we do a lot of research. We will send out surveys constantly. We do a tax rate book every year so that everyone can know all the tax rates across the state from counties and cities. We get lots of questions sometimes about, how many of this happened then? What is the average salary of staff attorneys in the state of Kansas? So we will find that out. We'll run surveys. We'll go do the legwork. So we got a lot of research as it relates to cities, and we publish a lot of that. That's always available to our members and even our non-members. So turn to the next one, you'll see our legislative advocacy team. I put myself first, even though it probably should have been Nathan. Good thing he left. He didn't see I accidentally put him last. But our lead counsel, general counsel, who you will definitely sometimes see, especially in other committees or sitting behind me when I say, I don't know, let me ask the lawyer because I have no idea, is John Goodyear. You'll also see in several other committees you may be in Wendy Stark, who is our legislative liaison. She very much, I always tell folks, I cannot be an expert on everything. That is a fool's errand if you believe that's even possible. So she very much is focused on things like water and transportation issues for us. Particularly, one of the things we really try to do with our members, we have discovered that we as a state are losing out on lots of federal funding, and it's a capacity issue, right? Cities simply do not have the capacity to pay for, hire full-time, or have grant writers in-house enough, and it's a very complicated process. We actually got a call last year from both some congressional leadership representatives and the White House here at the league saying, we have all this money, why aren't you guys asking for it? And we said, we're trying. So we are very much working at the league to find ways. We're working both with some departments here in the state and with some of our congressional offices and then our own internal office to figure out how we can increase that capacity so that the state of Kansas is not losing out on dollars that A, are just sitting there, but B, other states are going to get them. Right? Those dollars are not going away, regardless of whatever administration is. Some of those are very set programs. And so we need to make sure in Kansas that we are accessing those. So Wendy is very much in charge of helping lead that effort. And like I said, we've had many conversations with our congressional offices who are also very interested in making sure that money gets to Kansas. So next slide or page, if you go to it. We do try to focus our efforts on issues that we say have real world impact. Our policies, as I said, are developed by our members through committees. We spend 6 months. Once this session ends, we will start having membership meetings all across the state, looking at what I'll talk about in a minute, our SMP, Statement of Municipal Policy, but it truly is membership driven. We'll look at that document. We'll make suggestions. Hey, this is coming up from our perspective as a staff. This may be how we want to look at it. Sometimes they say, great, Spencer. Other times they say, nope. And then I try to convince them otherwise. And then they say, no, you lose this argument. I say, all right, I'm here for you. That does happen. And so then I come up and make sure that that's our position. But it really is driven by our membership. We do respect the differences of our cities. We have 625 cities in the state. The people who serve on those are very different, just like this legislature looks very different. And so there's not always agreement among our members. If we have a split, we just won't take a position, and we'll tell you that. I will stand up here and tell you if that happens, this is what one side, some cities think, this is what other cities think. You have to figure it out, right? The old axiom is, some of my friends are against it, some of my friends are for it, and I'm with my friends, right? And so sometimes that is absolutely the position we have to take, but I always be clear about that. I'm not going to stand up here and try to say, don't worry about it. I'll try to give you both sides as often as I can, because we need to take that into consideration too as a league, as to where we can help find the middle ground to help local governments solve the problem. You will not hear us very often take positions on what we call social issues. Some of those just really are in your purview. We will always default to local control if that's part of the issue, but there are some more what I would call global issues that you were elected to deal with those issues. That is why you are a state legislator, and that is exactly your role in the state, not for us to necessarily get involved in. Certain individual cities, they might. Other groups might, and that's great, but we may not always take positions on those. Again, my efforts are a small percentage overall of what we do. I do encourage every city to have some sort of their own legislative agenda. I tell them, even if it's 2 things, it doesn't have to be, ours is 160 at the league, right, if you read our document, but even if it's 2 things, and I try to get the importance of that to them to help them prioritize some issues that as you're sitting up here in session representing those cities, you can look at them and say, is this one of your 2 or 3 things? Because it's coming, and I need, I saw the list, and I want to make sure if it's really that important to you, I want to really make sure I'm involved in that issue. And so we very much encourage them to provide some direction which helps them understand what issues are important to them, but also help you understand what issues may be important to that specific city. And I have spent time sort of working with their governing bodies to help them craft what that process looks like, how they make those decisions, and how they can do that. I always try to tell them, it's not that hard, it's just getting started the first time. And lastly on this page, collaboration for us is a key principle. Particularly since Nathan and I got here about a year before Nathan did. We had an interim when I was hired, and then Nathan came on board. And it has been very crucial and important to us to build relationships, particularly with other groups that sometimes we conflict with, right? We work very hard now with the Bankers Association, the Realtors Association, the Landlords Association, Kansas Chamber of Commerce, those types of groups who historically will bring forth legislation or have issues that impact cities, and what cities do impact them. So we think it is critical to at least have relationships with those groups to say, hey, first of all, when an issue comes up, call us. Maybe we've got the answer. We can see what other cities are doing and we can fix it. And before you drop a bill in the legislature, give us a chance to talk about it. There's a banking bill that's coming forward soon, and we've been spending time the last couple months with them working through that because it's very complex and it would have a huge impact on cities. And because of that relationship, that bill's much better for everybody, not just for cities, but for what they were trying to accomplish. And so what I tell folks is, we may not always be able to work it out, but you'd be surprised probably how often we can figure it out if you just give us an opportunity. And that's what I say to legislators too. You're often going to get a bill from a constituent or from a group. Maybe it's a preemption bill, and it may need to move forward. But I can tell you in the last 2 years, more than half of the preemption bills that were filed never got a hearing, in part because we went to those groups and said, what's the real issue? And then they told us, and we said, well, we can fix that right now. Oh, well, never mind then, right? And about half of the preemption bills over the last 2 years that actually got hearings that we weren't really sure about, once they had a hearing, we all sat down and said, you know, we can fix that this way. And then those didn't have to really move forward, or we fixed it in committee. And then, of course, there's always a bill or two that we just all get to go fight about and advocate for and have the process, right? So we do really try to say that those collaborations do make a difference. It not just helps us as cities navigate our concerns, but it really does solve some of the problems that people are trying to get resolved when they come to you as a legislature. Again, the next one, I talked on our legal expertise with the more than 2,000 calls and sort of the work that they do. This is especially critical for third-class cities because they really do not have the resources all the time to have full-time attorneys, not just on staff, but even have contracts with those folks. I touched on our contract and hiring services and the work that we do there. Our communication and outreach, there's a little bit of information on that. We do email alerts and weekly newsletters, lots of webinars and live streams, and we do print legislative directories for our members so they know how to get in touch with you. And in fact, next week, we also will be delivering to your offices a packet that we do palm cards for you. Just to remind you, even though most of you know, like it will tell you every city that's in your district, and they'll have contact information for some of those and for us. So we try to provide that resource to you also. So something you can have handy just in case you're like, oh wait, yeah, they are in my district. I can't remember. Too much redistricting and the lines keep moving. We do a lot of publications. There's a list there of some of them on budget tips, and we do a governing body handbook. We do print the Uniform Public Offense Code, which is used by pretty much every police department across the state of Kansas. In fact, we get those are purchased a lot and sitting in a lot of police officers' vehicles across the state. We do, like I said, we do many surveys, codes of procedures, and that tax rate book is something that people very much appreciate every year because in one handy book there you can see, well, like I said, what all the tax rates are across the state. And then we also print the Kansas Government Journal. It used to come out every month. Now it comes out 6 times a year. But we know that it's used by and read by a lot of folks. We do a lot of professional development and training. We have an annual conference every October. It's very well attended. We do leadership summits and we do a mayor's conference every year. We do a governing body institute. And then like I said, Nathan said, today is our local government day. We've got a lot of folks up here walking around talking to their representatives. And then again, we do lots of research and provide other resources. So that's last thing on this piece about the league is our statement of municipal policy. I encourage you all to go check it out. Like I said, it's about 100 and it's not that long. Some of them are just one sentence, I promise. But there's about positions on about 160 different issues that through the years have come through the legislature. It's very much a useful tool for me because as we work on that every year with our membership, when an issue pops up, even I can look at it and say, wait, where am I? I want to make sure our position on this is what I think it is. So, but it's also very much a useful tip for you to look through it and see where the city's positions have been. And if you don't like one of them, call me and maybe we can talk about it, right? There are several items in there, true, that over the last couple of years, through conversations with legislators, our positions have changed. We've gone back to our membership and said, I know why we took this position originally, but after further consultation and consideration and talking about what the state impacts are, we might need to tweak this and change this a little bit. So we are open to that. We are not just that's our position, deal with it. We will maneuver and change when we think it's absolutely necessary to accomplish our goals together. So that's the overview on the league. I don't know if you want to take questions on the league itself or you want me to hit up some of the issues I was going to put in front of you. It's up to you, Chair.
I can just open questions in general for you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Duncan? Apparently you're presenting very well.
You know, I try to just get right to it. So let's talk about this session. This is obviously not comprehensive. I'm not going to try to read all 160 plus positions from my SMP, but I will put a few things that we absolutely know are going to be in front of you in some form or fashion over the next couple months. And so, like I said, there may be a few others I don't hit here, but please feel free to ask me. Look, the first one's easy. It's always protection of home rule. I think what I always try to remind folks is it's constitutional home rule in Kansas. We're one of the few states who baked it into our Constitution. One of the frustrating things I hear from when there is, say, a preemption bill in front of committees, one of the frustrating I hear as supporters of those bills is their misinterpretation of what constitutional home rule was intended to do. Their interpretation is, well, we need uniformity. So constitutional home rule was intended so that all the cities look the same and we have the same rules for everybody. That's actually the exact opposite of why constitutional home rule exists. Constitutional home rule exists because cities said, we understand we're in the same state, and of course there needs to be certain consistencies. But for a lot of lower level, if you want to call them that, or a lot of policies in particular, we want our local government to be in charge and dictate those laws because we have direct access to our local governments, right? And so they put that in. So look, there are cities that do things, we think it's crazy too. I'll call them and be like, are you really gonna do that? And they're like, yeah, we are. Okay, that's your prerogative. You were elected by the local folks. You do it. I hope it works for you. And if it doesn't, you can fix it, right? But I always tell folks, just because one city does something doesn't mean that we suddenly need to correct it for the other 624. The analogy I always use is if you have 3 children and one robs a bank, they don't all deserve to go to jail, right? And sometimes that is what we worry, we fight against is we understand that this city may be making what could be viewed as a poor decision. We get it, but that doesn't mean we need the state to intervene. Let's go figure out locally how we can solve that problem and work with them to resolve it. And so we understand there are a lot of gray area issues. There are. They get up here and we all kind of look at each other. Well, is that preemption? Yeah, it kind of is. Is it? Should the state do it? Well, we don't think so, but I'm biased. I'm with the league, right? But I do tell legislators, if it's that gray of an area, when in doubt, lean on your Constitution, right? And then see if you can still work with the locals to resolve the issue before you pass that issue. So you'll hear me talk about, sometimes I will get up here or in other committees and I'll just say, to save us all time, constitutional home rule. You all know what it is. Please remember that. And then I'll get into whatever else I want to tell you because you will get sick of me saying it, but I will say it a lot and I will say it often. I talked earlier about retention, particularly in some of our rural communities when it comes to staff. One of the issues that may be before you and has before, but this session and moving forward is CAPERS. CAPERS 3, it's a perfectly fine program. But the piece that CAPERS 3 is missing that CAPERS 2 and CAPERS 1 too, but CAPERS 2 had was there is no incentive in CAPERS 3 to stay in the job long term. Right? You're either going to kind of get what you're going to get. So if you're there for 5 to 7 years, that's great. Staying that 10th year used to mean something. And so there used to be an incentive to say, I'm going to stay. Of course, I'm going to stay 3 more years because when I hit that year 10, that matters, right? That's gone. So what we have seen is it's easier to just say, okay, I think I'm going to change jobs, right? And so it's not that they don't like the job they're at, but maybe they can offer a little more pay in the private sector, or maybe they get poached by a bigger city and that may change some things, right? So there's a lot of reasons we would like to take this legislature to consider municipal employees doing some sort of rollback to CAPERS 2, but the biggest one is helping us retain those employees and giving them that little extra incentive to stick around a few extra years every year. There is a bill every year, you've heard it. It's passed the House twice, vetoed by the governor twice, although it was bundled one time with 16 other bills and once with 7 other bills. We can talk about the bundling process some other day, but that was what we all like to refer to as government competition. This is a bill that has said the last several years that if someone in the private sector believes that government is doing a duplicate service, then they essentially should be able to qualify for property tax and in some cases the sales tax exemption. We won't litigate that legislation today. What I will tell you, though, is besides the fact that we have many concerns with it, two important things I want to get across to you. One is we have never been allowed to be a part of the conversation of that bill. It was crafted on the Senate side both times. We were never allowed to be in the room to discuss it. There was one hearing over those 2 years, and then it was put in conference committee. So the first thing I say is when and if you talk about it, invite us to the room, because we have some thoughts, they might even surprise you, about some suggestions that we could put forward. The second thing is, if I was you over on the House side, and I've talked with other House members, you have not heard the bill once. None of your committees in the last 2 years have had an opportunity to hear the bill, vet the bill, go through this process in front of a committee. It has always been crafted in the Senate, then shoved in a conference committee. I can tell you that frustrates some folks who have been on the House side who are part of that conference committee. So my second request is just make that ask. If the bill comes forward, just make the ask that we would like to finally hear this bill over here on the Senate side before we take any sort of action. And if you can do those two things for us, then we're happy to have the conversation as the process is supposed to be. But those have been truthfully two of our big frustrations with that bill, as much as the bill itself, but that the process has been a little off. Two bills have been introduced in the House and Senate as it relates to elimination of the 3-mile zone. This bill has come before this committee. I honestly can't remember if it was last year or 2 years ago where the hearing was held. It may have been last year. It all runs together after 20 years, right? We understand there's some frustrations. Again, I'm not here to litigate the legislation today and have a whole hearing. It's a complicated bill, though, and elimination or adjustments to the 3-mile zone are very complicated. Our position, and I can also tell you the position of the counties, their association, and the position of the municipal utilities group, and lots of other utilities companies is, if you really want to take a look at it, fine, but it is so complicated, we would really like to see it put into an interim. Because there's so many moving parts as to interlocal agreements and utility issues and what it would really mean for some zoning. And it's fine. We're open to the conversation. We even acknowledge maybe there's time to tweak it, but we would really wish that you would urge for it to be in an interim, because we're not sure you can solve it in a 1-hour hearing in this building for as complicated as it is. So that is our ask if that bill comes forward. Property taxes, who doesn't love to talk about property taxes? I know today there's a hearing in the House regarding the mill levy rate and some staying revenue neutral. We are not weighing in on that. I'll tell you what we always say. It's our job at the local level, as you know, as you're elected, to work with your constituents on what your taxes should look like, sales and your mill levies. Well, that's your job here too. It's not my job to tell you what to do with your 21.5 mills. It's not my job to tell you if you should or should not stay revenue neutral. So do what you got to do. Again, that's what you were elected to determine amongst yourselves. That is why you are here at the state level. So we have not weighed in too hard on that one from your perspective. Just like last year, we didn't weigh in much on the income tax discussion because that's your purview. We don't deal with income tax. That is what you were elected to do. So we have other thoughts if bills come forward. What we don't want to see is, again, it goes back to collaboration. We just don't want to see bills that essentially penalize local governments that say, if you don't do this, we're going to mandate that you must stay revenue neutral or you must lower your mill levy, right? Those aren't productive. They box local governments in. And so we would just like, before that kind of legislation comes forward, to have some conversations. We think that the first step should be to look at the valuation system. We think it's not the only problem. We're not advocating that, but it's kind of like, you got to fix one piece over here before you can really evaluate what mill levy rates and other rates should look like. And we think we've tweaked some of that over the last few years, but we really haven't taken a look at the valuation system. And so that's kind of where our energy has been, is take a look at that. You'll see on the next page, we always are advocating for increased mental health and housing programs and services. There's not a single city in this state, no matter how big, that's not dealing with a housing crisis of some kind. We literally cannot build them fast enough. And certainly we have communities that could use some increased assistance with mental health problems within their communities. There just aren't enough places or access to doctors in some communities to assist those folks. The homeless issue continues to be a problem for every city. It's certainly a bigger issue for the top 6 cities in Kansas, right? Because they're bigger. We do have a situation where essentially folks are migrating to some of those cities, both either because they just hear, hey, there's resources and services there, which is now taxing the resources and services in those bigger cities, the Lawrence, the Topekas, the Wichitas, Kansas Cities, even Manhattans. We also, to be quite honest, and we're having this conversation with our members, we've got some cities who are telling, hey, why don't you go on over there, right? They can help you. We're working with the cities on that one. For instance, Lawrence has taken the position recently that if you have a direct connection to Douglas County, they will put you into their long-term services and programs and help you. If you do not have some sort of direct connection, they'll give you triage and immediate help, but then they're gonna find out where you came from and try to get you back there. Because they gotta stick with, helping the people who have a connection to their city and not let people get sent to their city. We think that's a pretty good policy for some cities to start with to try to help that issue. But to be honest, at this point, there is not a comprehensive program or guidance from the state of Kansas on how to handle the homelessness issue. The primary bills that have come up in this legislature the last 2 years focused on camping bans, or they were strings attached that said, well, if we're gonna provide you these services, we need you to put in place a law that says this. First of all, as a councilman who voted for and sponsored what is probably the toughest camping ban in the state of Kansas that we passed in Topeka, that's not the solution to the problem, right? They have to go somewhere. It's not like once you ban them from certain areas, they magically disappear from your community. They just go to other areas, right? It's a tool to help protect schools and other areas from and big encampments, but it's not helping anybody and it's not solving the problem. My other issue with that bill the last couple of years is preemption's one thing, and we get to, well, we have those battles and we have those battles. But telling us we have to pass a law is much different than telling us we can't pass a law. It's a fine distinction, but it is an important one because I don't think that the legislature wants to get in the business of telling every local government all the time what laws they have to pass. We'll follow the state laws you pass, and if the state of Kansas wants a camping ban, then pass a camping ban somehow at the state level, right? Don't do that upon us, which you may or may not do at the state level. We don't have the best answer. Our cities are working on it, but we do think at some point the state is going to need to find ways to be a little more proactive in assisting with what has now become a statewide problem of homelessness. And part of those issues derive back to what we talked about, the mental health services, addiction and mental health services. Makes up a pretty sizable group of that population. And right now, there's just not the help. There's nowhere to send those individuals to get the help they need. So recidivism is a huge problem. So homelessness is on the menu, I know, this year as some of your committees are going to talk about it. Last two things, sales tax. You guys, I use the pejorative term you guys, maybe not you guys, but you guys keep passing sales tax exemptions. It's killing us. It's killing us. You cannot continue to erode the tax base and then wonder why property taxes won't go down. It's not how the tax system works. We need, and you know this, we need a lot of people paying a little bit, not a little bunch of people paying a lot. And that is how we are funneling this tax system. And part of that is the continued erosion of that proverbial three-legged stool when it comes to that sales tax leg. You can and have the authority when you pass a law. You did this with the food sales tax, and we've figured out how to do it to keep us in streamlined compliance. You have the ability when a sales tax exemption comes in front of you to say, I'm elected to the state legislature, so I will absolutely consider a zero rate exemption on the state portion of your sales tax. But the local sales tax, which by the way is all voter approved at some point, all sales tax in Kansas local has to be voter approved, probably needs to retain with the locals so they continue to get that revenue. And at some point, if we want to talk about a law that gives us some flexibility to put that on the ballot to remove it, we can talk about that. But so what we're asking is any sales tax exemption you see, exempt, if you want to give the exemption, great, just exempt the state portion. Make it a zero rate and then leave ours intact because the list is really long and it's getting longer and it really is creating some issues, especially in communities, truthfully, for rural communities where we do have tourism sites and where we do have hunting and fishing. They're losing out on that sales tax revenue when they already have a very limited base of property tax, to pull from in the first place. So those exemptions are really actually hurting them also in terms of the tourism dollars that they collect. So that's our position on sales tax. I've been saying it for 3 years and nobody's listened yet, but that's fine. I'm stubborn, as my wife will tell you, and I'll keep putting it out there for you. Last thing is water. There's a lot of water bills. We've supported many of them. We try to take our direction, not just from our members, but we work very closely with the chairs of those committees and the legislators, particularly out in our rural communities. The number one message we preach on water is, and I say no matter what level of government you're in, nuances are not what we're good at, right? It's hard to be nuanced in government when you're passing legislation, but it is critical that there are nuances in water legislation because the issues people are dealing out with in far parts of western Kansas are not the same issues we're dealing up here at this part of the state. And that has to be factored into our water legislation. And so we really try very hard to take those different voices and messaging from the different regions of our state when those discussions come up and make sure, hey, is this helping them, but also addressing their issue over here? And if not, how can we correct that? So those are the issues I'll put in front of you that we're working on, and some keep me up at night, some don't, but that's the very quick version of what's on our radar, sir. And that's all I had.
Is there any questions for Mr. Duncan?
Mr. Chairman.
Wanda, I'll try to remember to say Representative Page.
I like what you said about sales tax, but you gave the example with the rural areas, and those of us in the urban areas are suffering too, because we have such a small base to tax that we're taxing them to death, and they're struggling to maintain their property as well as pay their taxes. So when you have such a small base and we're trying to figure out where do we get other revenue, and I'm not saying I smoke marijuana, but I'm trying to figure out what do we need to do? What other things can we use to generate funds? Because to me, it's unfair for that small group to bear the burden to pay everything. And when you say, no, this is too much, we need to support our schools. And then they make it seem like it's bad for people to say no, because they're being taxed to death. And they're trying to figure it out. So if you can come up with a solution for that, that would help us all.
I'm working on it, not just at the league, but in my own city, trying to figure it. Everything is an economy of scale to some degree, right? So anytime there's that sales tax exemption, yes, it impacts every city. But we literally have some cities and even counties where, for instance, let's say they have one Walmart. And that Walmart not only makes up a large percentage of their property tax collection, but it is a lot of their sales tax collection, right? And that was part of the conversation when the zero rate went on the state level as to why it was important to keep intact the local portion of that, because losing that revenue for that city or county that has that one Walmart that makes up such a large piece of its tax base makes a big difference every time a little bit of that, particularly if that Walmart collects 30% of its sales tax or 40% from people who come every winter and fall to hunt, right? Now we're again, to your point, cannibalizing ourselves instead of capturing revenue from people coming through the state.
Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Spencer, thank you for being here. Yep. There's been discussion in previous years, but I've heard it in the last week and a half since I arrived in the legislature, and you referenced it today, sales tax exemptions as it affects local governments, and you just were given an example. How do we, how does the league, and I'll ask the same of KAC going forward, help us get into that discussion about the exemptions and reviewing them? And I think they're into the triple alphabet as far as number of exemptions. Get into that discussion and sunsets or moratoriums for future, or eliminating some of the exemptions that are on the books without it becoming so political and so territorial. But how can the league, and again, I'll ask KAC the same question, how can they help facilitate that discussion?
So there's two levels to that. There's the state level and there's the local level. I think at some point the state level conversation has to be, because I think there is a lot of agreement, there should be reviews of those exemptions, and let's take another look. The problem becomes when the Boy Scouts are standing in front of you, right? I mean, there's just a very real problem, and say, no, don't take away our exemption, right? Or whatever group it is that you have a personal connection to, or that everybody believes that. is there the ability, desire, whatever you want to call it, to say, look, we're with you, but we really need to, I hear you. And what is the impact of that? So that's kind of the conversation that thankfully you get to have at the state level. At a local level, and I'm going to tell you, this is one of those where half my friends are for it and half my friends are against it, and I'm personally am someone who's for it. I do not have any authority at the local level to either, one, make an adjustment. I don't want to add sales tax, but remove a sales tax that was voter approved, or even put it on the ballot for reconsideration, right? So for me, I would like that authority as a city council person. I'll give you an example. I've got a city manager. We've got a budget deficit next year, and he's new. He's doing a really good job, but he wants us to put a sales tax initiative up to increase our sales tax. Personally, I've opposed to it, but I offered, well, wouldn't it be nice if we offered that we could also offer the option of removing our local portion, at least on food, as an offset, right? I can't actually do that because of state law. I would like to have those options. However, some of my friends who are against it will tell you, yeah, but then I'm going to have every local group at the local level doing what they do now at the state level, coming in saying, oh, please give me a sales tax exemption at the local level. And some folks just don't want to deal with that, right? Now, I've always been one who says, if you're going to run for office, you better be ready to make tough votes and say no and say yes and go through that. But I get it. That's a tough ask. Again, when the Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts or whatever group you want to insert are standing at your local level saying, you better give me this tax exemption, right? So some of that is we all have to personally decide what position we're going to take. But those are really the two biggest issues that come up when we talk about looking at those exemptions and reducing this local sales tax at the local level. But I think there is a conversation worth having about whether municipalities should have some ability to lower that sales tax.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, anyone else? Mr. Duncan, we appreciate your time.
Available anytime.
We'll look forward to hearing the rest of the state. That's the counties next week.
Right.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.
I do want to mention that we have the privilege on this committee of dealing with issues from the entire state. Everything in this county, everything in this city, or at least every group of people. One thing we just last week, we did something that wasn't novel, but was our duty, and that was to swear an oath to the Constitution of the United States and the state of Kansas. And that constitutional government is, I think, what Representative Barth mentioned earlier, and that is that it's all the people. And it's the people of the rural people in relation to urban people. It's business in relation to government. It's business in relation to the people. And we have the privilege in this committee of sometimes hearing some really unique situations that can be worked out when they're discussed. And sometimes the bill brings up the discussion. I think Mr. Duncan mentioned some things that get resolved after the bill is brought forward because it actually brings it to the forefront. Mr. Jay Hall from the Kansas Association of Counties will be here next week to kind of tell the county's perspective. It's a lot the same because it's the people of Kansas. That's why I like this committee for one reason, and every committee process is just cool. If you've been in city government at all or county government, you know that microphone there represents individuals, it represents businesses, represents lawyers, it represents lobbyists, it represents families that are concerned about a certain issue. And that microphone's open to all those people, the same people, and we get to, in a small setting, be able to glean through some things and make a decision whether something can go to the House in some kind of good fashion yet, or whether it needs a special committee to be dealt with. We have, and we'll also have bills through the time that may get referred to us that are not coming to that microphone. We have House Bill 2025 got referred to us from another committee that had to do with that 3 mile territory. We'll see what happens with that, but all those issues make this committee kind of fun, I think. Kind of great. So is there anything else you want to add? I do want to say, if you would please call myself or our committee assistant to let us know if you're going to be missing on a certain day. It's not against the law to be missing. It sure is helpful if you let us know. And that way we know at least we're going to have a quorum if there's something really big going on. Or sometimes illness waves come and hit us like a ton of bricks. So please know that next Wednesday is our next Monday is our next meeting. And I believe the counties will be here Monday or Wednesday? Monday. So no, also hopefully if there's bills to be had. We don't try to ask for bills. I'm kind of a limited government guy. And so if you don't have any bills, don't sit at home at night trying to figure out something to write. Because, you know, it might be good and it might really be good, but if there's a need, we're here to work on it and see if it's a need that the government needs to fill or the people can work out. Hey, we appreciate you, and we'll adjourn this meeting, and we'll see you on Monday.